And then we can officially call the meeting of the Strategic Harbor Plan Steering Committee to order. I just want to say thank you all for volunteering your time to serve on the steering committee, and thank you for your patience as this has taken a little while to get moving. But we are very appreciative of you guys coming tonight, and we are excited to hear all of your thoughts and any inside information you can offer us, as you guys are the people kind of with your feet on the ground, more directly involved in the harbor and on the properties that are directly impacted and adjacent to the harbor. So we are excited to hear your thoughts from a functionality and economic standpoint. And I will turn it over to Laura Kenny from Indigo River.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you all. I recognize some of your names from my time in Norwalk. As Amelia mentioned, my name is Laura Kenny. I'm with Indigo River, and we're the consultant team hired with HRNA to conduct the harbor management plan for this contract. With me, we have Alix from our team and Shay. Alix and Shay, would you like to introduce yourselves?
Shay Thoraldson from Indigo and TMS as part of this, managing partner in both firms. I am your maritime waterfront expert and also the licensed captain on the team. So navigation wise, you got me.
Hi all, Alix. I'm a resilience designer with Indigo River, and I'm working with Laura on primarily the mapping components on this project.
Thanks, Alix. And Anna, do you want to introduce yourself and your team?
Sure. I'm Anna Messer from HRNA Advisors, supporting Indigo River on this endeavor, on some economic analysis and governance work. My colleagues, Erman and Shuberteam, are also part of the team in here in Spirit. Thanks for having me.
And I'd love to learn a little bit more about the steering committee, if everyone wouldn't mind sharing a bit about themselves. Maybe Gary could go first. He's in the top left corner of my screen.
Working. Gary Wetmore. I have a marine construction business in town. I'm at 108 Water Street in Norwalk. I'm also a partner on 132 Water Street that we recently bought from the Bloom family. And I own one of the Norwalk Islands, Wood Island. So I'm pretty active on the river. Happy to be involved in this. Thank you.
Thanks, Gary. Alan, you're next on my screen. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi there. My name's Alan Kibbe. I'm the chairman of the Norwalk Harbor Management Commission. I'm a 40-plus year resident of the city of Norwalk, past Commodore at the Shore and Country Club, past vice president at the Shore and Country Club, and really a lifelong boater. And I sail a sailboat almost all the time out of Norwalk Harbor. Thank you.
Jeff?
Sure. Harbor Management Commission Vice Chair, been on the water since my grandfather taught me to sail when I was 5. Had a boat since I built my first one from Glenelg Boat Design. Anybody remember that out there? Anyway, bought it, or I built it using scrap wood, got out on the water, and ever since I've never turned back. So it's going to be fun.
Awesome. Blooms, you're on our screen next. It says Kelly, but I don't think is Kelly there?
Norman Bloom. I'm owner of Cops Island Oysters. Been working in islands here for a long time.
Great.
Hey.
Jerry? You're muted, Jerry.
How's that better?
Yep.
Yeah, good evening. My name is Jerry Tony. I'm the executive director at the Norwalk Seaport Association, a lifelong resident of Norwalk. Born on the water, lived on the water, fished, did everything else you could do on the water. No longer have a boat. I have something better. I have friends that have boats. So thanks for having me.
Awesome. And Matt?
Hey, good evening, everybody. I'm on the Norwalk Harbor Commission. Live on Norwalk Harbor, been boating here all my life, fishing nonstop in the islands, and surrounding areas and know the majority of the folks involved with this really well, and member East Norwalk, 4 or 5 different boat clubs in the East Norwalk area. So happy to be here.
Thanks. Jason?
Hi, everyone. Jason Patlis, President of the Maritime Aquarium at Norwalk. Happy to be here.
Thanks, Jason. And Robert?
Robert Stowers, I'm the Director of Recreation and Parks. And I've always had a keen interest in the water, from Seattle, and so been on these kinds of studies before. So glad to be participating.
Thanks, Robert. So we're really excited to have you all here. I think you'll provide really great information for us as we conduct this study. I have a bit of a presentation to share, just to kind of outline the goals of the study, what the timeline will look like, your role. We'll have a few questions for you, and then we can open it up to questions from all of you. If anyone wants to jump in while I'm presenting, feel free to cut me off and ask your questions as they come up too. I'm just going to share my screen here. Alrighty, so the first component was introductions. Next was agenda. So I'll jump right into it. Origins and purpose. So many of you know, and I know I spoke with many of you about the waterfront industrial study, and while that focused on the industrial side of the harbor or components of the harbor, and more of the inland components of the harbor, this study we're hoping to actually look at the in-water activity. A lot of the feedback that came up during that study was related to in-water activity and ways that we could move people from the water to the land. And so we're hoping that this study can focus a little bit more on the big picture as it relates to the way the harbor functions, from commercial, recreation, tourism, shell fishing, all of it, environmental. And we're hopefully going to help your team bring together a roadmap for how the harbor can work and how everyone can work together to meet their goals within the harbor. Our schedule here, a little bit tough to read, and I'll mail out an updated version so we can dive into it a little bit more. But I'm actually, you know what, let me pull up the, you can all still see my screen. I can zoom in this way. So right now the project really kicked off in December, but due to the holidays, we paused a little bit and did some background work in existing studies and the contract to kick us off. Right now, we're working on a background of the current harbor uses. So we'll get a little bit more into that later, but looking at the existing conditions, existing studies within the harbor, and we're hoping to get that to all of you for review by the end of March. That will include the physical components of the harbor, which the TMS and IR team will be looking at, and an economic analysis of the harbor that the HRNA team will be looking at as their specialty. Once we have that developed, we'll then jump into recommendations, and we're expecting that to be a bit of an iterative process that will include community engagement throughout the process. So we'll learn from you what you feel the harbor looks like now and how it could be bettered. And with what we learn from you and our expertise and studies, we will present recommendations. We hope to have those to you by September. And then simultaneously throughout the summer, we'll be working on a study of the city-owned street ends and how those relate to public access and ways that we could open up the harbor a little bit more. the steering committee role. So all of you are absolutely experts on the harbor, and we're excited to hear what your experience has been on the harbor and how it can inform the studies. When I was working in Norwalk on the industrial waterfront study, we heard so much about the different users and the way they interact and the way they work around each other. And so we're hoping to incorporate some of that information and any additional lessons learned about what people like and what they don't like about the harbor currently, and how we might lean more into what everyone's looking for in the future of the harbor. Your job will be to hold us to our contract and make sure that we're meeting the tasks, we're meeting them timely, and that we're meeting the interests of the city. So as you provide us with information and public concerns, we're hoping to meet those goals, and we ask that that you ensure that you hold us to it. As I mentioned before, this study will focus on marinas, boatyards, aquaculture, the full economic picture of the harbor, and how that relates to the people uses. So tourism, boaters, more recreational fishing, swimmers, they maybe in the lower harbor, the different boat clubs. A big goal of this will be to connect people from the water to the land. So how can we bring in boaters and maybe connect them to so much of the economic activity in town, and really lean into Norwalk's maritime culture? And of course, you know, Indigo River being a transdisciplinary design studio, we will be always focused on sustainability, resilience, and environmental protection. I went over this a little bit as it relates to the schedule, but it might be easier to read here. We will be conducting an audit on current harbor uses. That's what we're doing currently. Harbor recommendations. Throughout the process, we will be conducting community and stakeholder engagement with your team, as well as specific groups that we've learned about from the city that have an interest in the harbor. The study of city-owned street ends. So how are the city-owned street ends being used? We know that some of them might be underutilized or could open up access to people for the harbor. And then more recently, a mooring study was added. We're hoping that the mooring study will actually run concurrently with the current harbor uses and harbor recommendations. So we'll look at the existing moorings fields within the harbor, and then potentially recommend a plan for additional mooring fields. I know that that's been a hot topic, and we have Shay, our voting expert on the team, to run that study. Regarding next steps, we need to work with your team to set up regularly occurring meetings. I know that this date worked for everyone tonight, but I'll send out a poll after this meeting to talk about, we heard that some people would prefer them during the workday, whereas others might prefer them at night. So I can send out a few options. Ideally, we'll meet once a month and run our deliverables by your team, ask any questions related to what we're working on to try to get your feedback, and look to you to be a voice of the public and of harbor users. The next item that we're looking for from the steering committee most immediately is a definition of water dependent uses. So Anna's team is covering the water dependent use topic area, and they'll need that to inform their economic studies of what exists currently and what might be proposed for the future. Anna, do you want to jump in and share your thoughts on that?
Yep. Thanks, Laura. So I believe a memo that we wrote was kind of sent around, which is kind of an initial understanding of the definition of water dependent uses as it could pertain to Norwalk. And so it's important that we kind of come to a kind of clear definition of what these uses are, which is defined by a list of NAICS codes that you could see in the table in the memo. So to inform the initial list that you'll see, we've kind of derived that from two things. One is just our previous project experience in the kind of general Northeast region in Rhode Island and Massachusetts and New York, looking at water dependent uses and this kind of economy. And we've done similar analyses where we've needed to make a list of these NAICS codes. So we kind of used both that, but more importantly, in Connecticut statutes, there is a definition for water dependent uses. It's short, it's a paragraph long. It mentions some of the uses, and we kind of, again, mirrored that onto the NAICS codes that you'll see. And we've kind of generally sorted them into a set of categories. NAICS codes are very specific and sometimes overlapping. So we kind of wanted to digest it into something a bit more simpler. But we really want to kind of, this was a starting point, and we don't want to miss anything that might be missing that is reflective of water dependent uses. And we don't want to necessarily include things that aren't relevant to Norwalk, both current or future uses in industries. That being said, when we look at the data, that would just kind of return a 0. So it's mostly it's just crucial that we're not missing anything that you would want to see reflected as a water dependent use when it comes to industries and how they're categorized. So I don't know if we exactly held time now, and don't necessarily want to use up all this time going back and forth on 6-digit NAICS codes. But of course, if people have some immediate thoughts, I think maybe you can hear them now, and then there's an opportunity to share more detailed feedback in the coming week or so.
Has everyone had a chance to see the memo? I can also float up on the screen right now.
But I just have one thing to add. I think another resource to look at would be the newly revised zoning code, and specifically the water, the marine commercial. So there was a lot of back and forth with our review and planning and zoning developing this about to make sure that that certain activities were captured and specifically allowed in the zoning. So I think that's just another resource to look at in terms of what specific thought has gone into marine commercial activity in the harbor.
Appreciate that, Chris. Thank you.
And Anna, maybe you could give a rundown of, I don't think everyone works with NAICS codes, and so maybe just explaining their purpose and how these definitions might be used.
Yeah, great point, Laura. Thank you. So NAICS codes is a type of characterization used to classify businesses and the types of business they engage in. There can go up to 6 digits. At the 2-digit level, you would see things just like manufacturing, agriculture, retail trade, kind of the vaguest level. And then as you go down to 3-digit, 4-digit, all the way to 6-digit, you get into more specific uses. So as an example of the kind of NAICS codes that we're looking at and the types of businesses we want to make sure we're surfacing and analyzing, the 2-digit NAICS code for agriculture is 11. Aquaculture there's a 4-digit code, but then from there you can get more specific into finfish farming, shellfish farming, and other aquaculture. And so it's really important that we hit all the 6-digit codes that would comprise all the aquaculture activity happening in the harbor. But basically different data sources that we're looking at when we want to look at the number of jobs in these industries, as well as the businesses themselves that align with these industry codes. That's the kind of one of the inputs that we put into make sure we're getting the correct data out. No one is necessarily going around talking about things in NAICS codes, but it's really kind of, part of the data analysis process. And I think that's, again, kind of why we wanted to zoom out. We talk about things more in terms of industry categories like aquaculture, like boating and marinas. And in the memo, we've kind of made an effort to use language that we would more talk about, not necessarily at the level of the 6-digit NAICS, as well as kind of including in italics the language that you see in the Connecticut statute. Again, and I think we would add some of the language in the zoning code that Chris mentions, just to kind of show the overlap of how all these things align in terms of how they're thinking about water dependent uses, and then kind of reflected back into how we think about the industries that people are working and living around.
This is Jerry. Tony, may I make a comment?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm curious. I'm not sure who was speaking before about the zoning issues. Excuse me, may have been Stephen, but I'm curious as to how does this group or how does your work relate to existing zoning regulations, rules, and requirements? In other words, could out of this meeting or could out of this group or discussion or survey come to a conclusion that current zoning regulations are inappropriate, appropriate, antiquated, whatever? I mean, could that and would that be a possibility coming out of this group?
I can answer that one. So yes, yes and no. We won't be doing an analysis of the full zoning code to the level of detail that the zoning rewrite did. We are looking at the existing zoning as it compares to what uses are currently in the harbor. And if we find that some of these desired uses or existing uses aren't currently allowed by zoning, a recommendation from the study might be to look at zoning and consider if this desired use should be included. Understanding that you recently underwent this zoning rewrite and there has been an extensive study about marine commercial along the harbor, it seems a bit unlikely that we'll have too many changes to recommend. But this does align with zoning and what uses people might want to see on the harbor, for sure.
I just wonder how far you can go beyond existing uses if the applications in place are in compliance with current zoning regulations without making significant changes to the zoning regulations. In other words, if it's marine, I can't give a very good example, but if it's used for if it's a particular use now and zoned accordingly, why could you not just why could not you just petition for a complete zoning change in that particular area to meet what may be a discovered need in this process?
It's the discovered need. I think you hit the nail on the head. Is historically there were trades there, there's current trades there, and there's future trades. So trying to identify those ones that stick out is where you might want to slide things around. You might look at a retail zone area on the waterfront and it's nothing but parking lot. You might want to rethink that, get that area rezoned from retail to waterfront, whichever zoning you want there, to the benefit of the community instead. So it's more of an opportunity zoning thing.
Thank you.
Of course, we're going to ask that you all look at this memo and provide your feedback over the next week or two. So you'll absolutely have more opportunity to think about this and review it on your own. But if anyone else has any questions or comments that they want to go over now, we have our experts on the call. So I'm sure Anna can help answer any questions related to this topic. Jason, I see your hands raised.
Yeah, thanks. So one of the things I didn't see in either the federal list of occupations and jobs or in your write-up is anything that relates to environmental jobs on the water. We've got, for example, at the Maritime Aquarium, a number of conservation biologists that are employed in looking at climate change related activities with respect to salt marsh. They're doing shoreline restoration. I don't see any of that captured in what you circulated.
I would say that if it's missing, it was an oversight, but those NAICS and those trades are a part of what we're considering sustainability and resiliency systems. But aquaculture biologists, things like that. So it will be in there. We'll make sure it's refined so that the next list covers those.
Okay, great. I will say I looked at those federal listings and I didn't even see it listed there. So I'm not sure where
it's a very oddly defined criteria right now, because you can go to biologist and then it's really part of biology, but then it's not. There's no such thing as an environmental biologist, so you can't do that. And even ecologist and some of those other things get linked together. But there are codes, so and because we actually use some of those codes for our own business, I'll make sure that we have that with HRNA.
That'd be great. By the same token, we have a lot of educators who are specifically hired for teaching programs on coastal governance, coastal issues. And so I think there's probably room to add something in the education sector along the same lines.
Yep, I think that's a great point, Jason. I think both are great points, and definitely be connecting with Jay on the first point you made. I think, yeah, there are a set of codes here you'll see which, say you're looking at education, which probably isn't a 6-digit code, but something more generally. But the appropriate 6-digit version of that, it's not that all jobs within a certain study area are going to be water dependent, but certainly to your point, like a certain number of them that connect to, organizations like yours and others that are doing that kind of educating definitely would want to be captured and counted as water dependent.
Great, because I think there are other organizations and employers besides the Maritime Aquarium that would have positions that fit those categories.
100%, without a doubt. Yeah.
Thank you.
Did anyone else have any other? Yep. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Alan.
Yeah, I just would like to add, I think that one of the important things with the timing of this study is that Norwalk's harbor has changed from a waterfront-based old school harbor business to a very different time now. That a lot of that industry has gone, and we have the artifacts of those things still in place that sometimes they're charming, sometimes they're eyesores. But I think that it's a need to change to determine what the opportunities are for the harbor. Right? And again, it's sort of tangential to this, but the Manresa project is kind of related to this too. Now that that's been announced, but it's I think it's a great opportunity to also kind of look forward to seeing what this harbor can be, because its past was illustrious, but we're not building boats here upriver anymore and things like that. We just have to find what the new opportunities are, and also keep in mind that we have a large minority component to our citizens in Norwalk, and I think it's important for those folks to be have more opportunities to utilize the waterfront for educational purposes, but also recreation and to explore that dimension of what we have here in Norwalk as well. So that's my 2 cents.
Thanks, Alan. That is helpful. Anybody else have feedback on the NAICS code? And if you haven't received the memo already, we'll send it out again. And we're asking for your feedback over the next week or two. If you see anything missing, or you have questions about what's on there, we're happy to talk through that. Okay, so the next step is just an update on the schedule and next steps. So we'll be asking for your feedback on the water dependent uses. And once we receive that feedback, we're going to start stakeholder interviews. And so I think some of you likely are on some of the interview teams, and many of your coworkers, peers, people in the city that are very familiar with the water. We're going to be asking for feedback on existing conditions and what people want to see. And so after this meeting, we'll start scheduling those interviews, and they will run throughout the month of March. And then we will use those interviews to inform the existing conditions analysis. Once that's complete, and we submit the audit on current harbor uses, we'll then meet again and do some more community and stakeholder outreach to inform the recommendations. So, of course, the whole study will be informed by community outreach, and we'll continue to look for experts during those community engagement moments. But when we have maybe some quick questions or questions that we think your expertise will be most helpful in, such as the definition of water dependent use, will come right to this team. via email if necessary. We can also schedule impromptu meetings. However, we are hoping to meet at least once a month with this committee to get your feedback on what we're working on. So I know we have some members of the public. Perhaps we want to open the conversation up first to the steering committee to see if anyone has any questions about what I've spoken about already, maybe separate from the NAICS codes. And then we can open up to the public. Hey, Chris, I see your hand's raised.
Hi. Sorry, I have kids in the background. They're going to go sit over in the corner, please, boys. I just wanted to volunteer that I did the initial scoping for the street end study. So I've done a full inventory, and we did the original grant application for that with the Port Authority. So I have a lot of background information on that, just to keep you guys from having to duplicate any effort there, and just to give you, from the Harbor Commission, what we're looking for in terms of next steps. I mean, we have concepts, but this is sort of a pre-designed study, something that we can go into this in a smaller group if you like. So whatever I can be of use for that, let me know. I can meet with the group or
Pre-design works for us as well.
Sure.
That would be really helpful. We have it scheduled for later in the study period, but if you have any materials to share currently, I think we actually could get started on it earlier, because it's a little bit separate from the rest of the work that's going on, despite feeding it.
Yeah.
So it would be great if you could.
Yeah, I have plenty of stuff. And so I guess through Amelia, we'll get emails to so I can distribute whatever material I do have already.
Thank you.
Sure thing.
Anybody else have any feedback on what we've discussed today? Alrighty, Amelia, I leave it up to you to open it up to the public.
So we don't actually have any attendees, and we have checked. The link is open. It's accessible to the public. There is just no public here to provide any public comment or participation at the moment.
Okay, well, we'll be ready at the next one in case anyone comes out.
Well, you are all the public too. It is your city, so.
Yep. That's everything we had for today then. Of course, there are a few follow-up items, but it was great to meet you all. And Amelia does have our contact information if anything comes up that you want to share with us. But we'll keep working away at the audit on current harbor uses and hope to get that to you very soon.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you all.